We are now live.
Hello, folks. Welcome. Just going to wait a couple seconds as I see more and more people just kind of trickle in. Welcome to our very first webinar. Okay, I can see the numbers starting to slow down a bit. So we have a very tight schedule today. So I am just going to get right into it. So Anin, Buju, Sego, Tanshi, welcome. We're so happy you could join us for our very first webinar for our Do Better launch tour. Today, we're focusing specifically on the social service sector, and we have an amazing lineup of speakers over the next hour. I'm going to get into that very soon, but first, hello, folks. My name is Haley. I use she, her pronouns. I'm coming from Saugeen territory, Gitche Namukwadong or Owen Sound. I work at YouthLine as the Manager of Engagement and Partnerships. So very quickly, for folks who are new to YouthLine, just wanted to provide a bit of context of who we are. So LGBT YouthLine is a 2SLGBTQ+ youth-led organization that affirms and supports the experiences of youth who are 29 and under across Ontario. We've been in operation for 27 years, and we offer multiple different programs, including an anonymous peer support line, a resource database, and multiple 2S LGBTQ+ youth programs. I'm going to pass it over to Burka.
Thanks, Haley. Just wanted to make sure the PowerPoint is on, and I just want to get folks some housekeeping points in case all of a sudden you can't see us or the interpreter. I want to start by thanking our ESL interpreters today, Rogue and Jordan, who will be with us for the entire webinar. Also note that there is closed captioning. So if you need to turn on or off, you can control it. At the bottom, you will see something called Live Transcript, CC, and you can control if you want to see subtitles or not. And you can also manage how large it looks and what font it is. You can also, you'll notice that the chat is closed for today's webinar. However, the Q&A section is open. So our tech support for the day is Chrissia. So if you have any questions, you can put it in the Q&A and we'll respond. And you can also ask any questions about the report or anything. And then we'll also talk a little bit more about how we'll have a Q&A at the end, and you can submit questions that way as well. You'll notice there's speaker view and gallery view, so we will be spotlighting folks at different times. You should be able to adjust and adapt how large the presentation is and how large the people on the screen are. And you can always remove spotlights if you really want. You can go to side-by-side gallery view, but speaker view will give you the view of what we're spotlighting at a given time. And again, if you have questions, you can put it in the Q&A. So I want to start this session. I guess I should introduce myself. First webinar. Hello, everyone. My name is Burka. I use they, them pronouns. I'm the executive director of YouthLine and have the privilege of, I guess, leading this organization and working with this amazing group of people. And super excited that folks are here today in spite of everything that's going on in this province. So thank you, whether you're seeing this live today or you're picking this up later on. I want to start by naming that this event is happening on land that is colonized land. If we can just go to the next PowerPoint. I don't know who's managing our PowerPoint. Thank you. That the land we work and live on throughout Ontario is colonized land and home to many Indigenous territories. YouthLine's head office is situated in Takaranto, which is the traditional territory of the Huron-Wendat, the Haudenosaunee, and most recently Mississaugas of the Credit River. We offer our gratitude and solidarity to the Indigenous people who have and continue to care for, protect, and defend this land. Although it's important to acknowledge the land, it's only a first step. We're all treaty signers and are thus responsible and accountable for the violence that Indigenous people face every day. Colonialism is ongoing, and Indigenous land and people continue to still be attacked. Today, as we have conversations about the Do Better report and the 7 recommendations, specifically in relation to the social services sector in Ontario, we felt it important to name that social services throughout Turtle Island have a long and violent history of anti-Indigeneity, colonization, and genocide. Different types of social services are largely responsible for the forced removal of Indigenous children from their homes, families, and territories, both historically and also in present day. As we continue to work to support 2SLGBTQ youth, it's important for us to acknowledge the ongoing harm through the systems we work in. And YouthLine is not separate from this. To continue to understand our history and take action to decolonize our work in spaces. This also includes supporting Indigenous movements across Ontario, many of which are led by Two-Spirit, Queer, Trans, Indigenous youth. So thank you for being here and listening to these recommendations and hoping that you can also take a lot of the recommendations around how we can better be in solidarity with Indigenous folks. I'll pass it back to you, Haley.
Amazing, thanks, Berka. So if we could go to the next slide, I'm going to very quickly provide an overview of what we're going to be talking about today. So first things first, we're going to be joined by Shivani and Anu, who are going to do an overview of all 7 recommendations. And as folks who have been involved in these recommendations since the very beginning in 2019, they'll provide a bit of context as to how they were created, a little bit of backstory. So that will be the first 10 minutes. From there, the majority of this webinar is actually going to be an amazing youth panel. So 3 amazing youth and an amazing moderator who are going to have conversations about the recommendations report in relation to the social service sector. So that will be about a half an hour. And then after that, we're going to have a question and answer period that's specifically going to be for folks who are out there in the audience. If you have questions for any of us as YouthLine staff and folks who have been involved in this report, this is your time to ask them. And then we're going to wrap up and talk about some next steps. So we can go to the next slide. And before Anu and Shivani join us, I'm just going to do a super quick history of the report. So in February 2020, LGBT YouthLine released the results from our 2SLGBTQ+ youth needs assessment. And it was called We're Here, 2SLGBTQ+ youth across Ontario assert needs and experiences. So one of our leadership programs, the Provincial Youth Ambassador Project, led the needs assessment and was able to gather responses from almost 1,200 youth throughout Ontario. So based on the needs assessment reports that were launched in 2020, our team began to imagine recommendations for how to move forward. The demands of the youth from the needs assessment were clear. We need change in Ontario. We need services, support, sectors, politicians, those in positions of power to do better. 2SLGBTQ youth deserve better. Which brings us to our report. So as you all know, do better, 2SLGBTQ youth recommendations for change in Ontario. So I'm going to pass it over to 2 of the most amazing humans to share these recommendations, Anu and Shivani. So I'll just do a bit of an introduction. So Anu has been with us since the very beginning of this research project in 2019 as the lead research consultant, supporting YouthLine staff and youth ambassadors in the original youth needs assessment and taking the lead on the recommendations report. She has been an integral part of the team, pouring so much time and care every step of the way. And also excited to introduce Shivani, who has also been with us since the beginning. In 2019, Shivani started as a youth ambassador as part of the Provincial Youth Ambassador Project, taking a strong lead on the needs assessment creation, delivery, and analysis. And in 2020, she moved in to be the operations coordinator at YouthLine. So I think y'all are really lucky to be hearing from these 2 amazing humans. So I'm going to pass it over to them for the next 10 minutes.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Haley, for that very beautiful introduction. So I am Shivani. My pronouns are she and her. As Haley said, I am the operations coordinator here at YouthLine, but I did start as a volunteer with the Provincial Youth Ambassador Project, which took a very big lead on the needs assessment and the recommendations that we are going to be seeing today. So we will start with recommendation 1, redesign health system services and programs for 2SLGBTQ+ youth, especially mental health services and care for trans youth. Healthcare is failing 2SLGBTQ youth. We are disproportionately impacted by health-related issues, and we are not getting the support that we deserve. And what does this mean during a pandemic? It means that with health clinics being repurposed for COVID response efforts, 2S LGBTQ+ youth have to travel further for treatment and care. It means gender-affirming surgeries are being delayed, which has serious impacts on trans youth. It means that 2S LGBTQ+ youth need to see change now more than ever.
We're going to be taking turns sharing the recommendations. I'm Anu or Anuradha. My pronouns are she and her. It's an honor, and I'm really humbled to be able to share some of the recommendations in the context with all of you. Recommendation number 2 is that in suburbs, smaller cities, towns, and on reserves, intentionally dedicate resources, that is space, time, energy, and funding to directly support 2S LGBTQ youth. Depending on where you live in Ontario, you can have a totally different experience as a 2S LGBTQ youth in terms of services, programs, finding and building community, and more. We know that some urban centers in Ontario are pretty well resourced. Some of you may be joining from places where there aren't the same level of resources available. Where I'm from in Peel, and actually where Shivani's from, also, 2S LGBTQ youth and adults and elders have been advocating for more resources to come directly into the hands of young people for what feels like a really, really long time. In rural communities and on reserves, there's often little to no money allocated or even made available to directly support 2S LGBTQ youth. Those with power over budgets, interesting conversation as the federal budget is being discussed and debated starting today, those with the power need to do better.
Recommendation 3, develop mechanisms for grassroots 2S LGBTQ+ youth organizing to access much needed resources and supports. So according to the needs assessment, 55% of youth have not accessed a 2S LGBTQ+ space. It's not just about the existence of spaces and resources, it's about who has created them and why. You can find this quote that I'm going to read from the needs assessment on the Do Better website. And I think it truly speaks to what 2S LGBTQ+ youth are looking for when accessing resources and supports in Ontario. To quote, "It's about the community, not the credit. Focus on making positive collective change through collaborative work, rather than minor deliverables with your name on it." The only places in Peel where I've personally felt safe and seen as a queer person of color existed through grassroots organizing. And I wasn't even able to access these spaces until my early 20s. According to the needs assessment, top needs that 2S LGBTQ+ youth addressed were to access these services and spaces were low to no financial cost, having them within close distance, whether that be from home, maybe that's a working space, confidentiality, that's very important when it comes to safety, and ensuring that these are youth-based spaces. But these cannot happen without developing these mechanisms for grassroots organizers to access resources and support.
The fourth recommendation is the meaningful involvement of 2S LGBTQ youth, especially racialized and Indigenous 2S LGBTQ youth, in decision-making at the local, regional, and provincial levels. Tokenism is simply not what 2S LGBTQ youth want, need, or deserve. This feeling that many of us are having right now, that the government may not be caring about what we need, this is something that so many 2S LGBTQ youth said in the needs assessment. I'm thinking back to the time when staff and volunteers and ambassadors, we actually sat around the table looking at all of the data together. I think, being able to share skills with youth and having them be involved in actually deciding what the report would look like is a kind of micro version of what this looks like in terms of making decisions. This recommendation is an opportunity to change things up. What would it look like to have youth not just at the table, but to have a space or spaces that truly honor 2SLGBTQ youth perspectives? We may have youth as trustees on school boards, but how do we ensure that they have a meaningful experience, that their perspectives are heard and honored? And how do we create other spaces at all levels where decisions are being made about us without having community members present?
Recommendation 5, proactive efforts to increase 2S LGBTQ plus youth representation in positions of power and influence. Services, resources, supports, spaces, none of them can be created without 2S LGBTQ youth helping in the consultation. I remember going through the responses on what 2S LGBTQ youth want to say to decision makers and just reading over and over again that youth want to be part of the decision-making process for anything that involves 2S LGBTQ plus youth. And it's just so important that racialized and indigenous 2S LGBTQ plus youth are prioritized in these conversations. Because the same way you cannot make decisions for 2S LGBTQ plus youth without consulting these youth, you cannot make decisions for racialized and indigenous 2S LGBTQ plus youth without prioritizing them and consulting them and making sure that we are part of the conversation.
The next recommendation will not surprise folks at all if you've been listening to conversations that 2S LGBTQ youth and others have been having. Clearly, we just need to make changes. So mandate change in building and facility standards to have safe, accessible, all-gender washrooms in all public spaces in Ontario, including on reserves. This is simply about safety. The lack of all-gender washrooms in public spaces creates unsafe situations. It's beyond time for this to change. Gender identity and expression were added to the Ontario Human Rights Code in 2012. It's almost 10 years past that time, and yet public spaces like schools, community centers, and more continue to fail 2S LGBTQ youth. In my own grassroots organizing in Mississauga, over 10 years organizing and work, we've actually only ever been in one space that had an all-gender washroom, a dedicated washroom. We need to change.
And the 7th and final recommendation as part of the report, comprehensive and ongoing training and capacity building focused on supporting 2S LGBTQ plus youth and challenging homophobia, biphobia, and transphobia and racism. When I was a youth ambassador in 2019, I shared a house with around 20 other 2S LGBTQ plus youth during our opening retreat. And I just remember listening to and sharing stories and experiences about how the lack of understanding of service providers, healthcare professionals, educators on how to support 2S LGBTQ plus youth just creates and adds onto our traumas. It impacts our health, especially our mental health, and it increases the violence on 2S LGBTQ plus communities. This was a very brief overview of the 7 recommendations on how Ontario can do better. If you have not already, you can read through each recommendation along with statistics and quotes from our needs assessment, as well as suggestions and examples on how to implement each recommendation at our website, dobetter.youthline.ca. Now it is time to move on to the next portion of the webinar. I'm so excited to have the opportunity to introduce the amazing individuals on our 2S LGBTQ plus youth panel. They will be sharing their thoughts and their recommendations and how the social services sector, can do better. So without further delay, let's meet our moderator. So Rosie is a professor, practicing doula who is currently living on unceded and unsurrendered Algonquin territory in Ottawa, Ontario. Rosie is interested in the intersections of racial, food, and gender justice. As the outreach coordinator for AIDS Committee of Ottawa, Rosie focuses on the intersections of Black people's lives. They like to uncover the persecutions that affect Black women's lives, like the carceral system, education, health, art, sex, parenthood, environmental degradation, and disability justice. Rosie is a graduate of the University of Toronto in Women's and Gender Studies.
Hello. Hello, everyone. I am so happy to be here. And I am excited, like youth are like my favorite people. So I'm really excited to be here with all of you. My bio said that I graduated from the University of Toronto, but that's actually, I graduated from the University of Ottawa. So I just don't want to say something that is untrue about me. There's a lot about me that I can say, but it's not about me today. It's about our panelists that we have. I'm just here to moderate. I am so happy to be here because, you know, Gen Z keeps me on my toes as a millennial. So I'm just really excited to be here with you folks. I'm going to introduce the panelists that we have here with us. So Wei Tao is a queer youth from Beijing. He joined the Provincial Youth Ambassador Project to raise awareness of the struggles faced by youth in all spectrum of the 2SLGBTQ+ community. Currently a law student, good luck with that, Wei Tao hopes to become a legal advocate on issues disproportionately affecting marginalized communities. And Wei Tao uses he, him pronouns. So welcome. Daniela, she, her. Daniela Leacock is a Black Bayesian mental health advocate who enjoys spending her time fawning over her foster cat and riding her bike when it's warm. Oh my God, are you me? Daniela is passionate about the success of the Black community, especially 2SLGBTQ+ folks, and believes that community care is how we heal and support each other. Welcome, Daniela. And last but certainly not least, we have Jordan C. Jordan C works regularly as a peer support volunteer for the LGBT YouthLine. Driven by his many passions, Jordan is a leader who takes pride in serving his communities at the national, regional, and local levels, working with the First Robotic National Youth Council, the Stratford Festival Student Advisory Committee, the TVDSB as a student senator, as his school's robotic team captain, along with youth opportunities, unlimited focus groups, his school's GSA, and Black Student Union. Jordan makes equity, diversity, and inclusion and supporting youth at risk of one of his top priorities. He is delighted to serve as the Do Better webinar panelist. Wow, Jordan is busy. You all are very busy, so welcome. Thank you for being here. We don't have a lot of time, so what we're gonna do is that I'm gonna jump right into the questions. Y'all ready? Good, everybody can hear me? Okay, perfect. So the first question is around the needs assessment. So many of the youth who participated in the needs assessment identified that they need more, like more services and programs, but specifically more social services where 2SLGBTQ youth are leading and guiding these services. So in your opinion, or in your experience, or even if it's something that is intuitive to you, how can we get to a place where that is the case, where youth are leading and guiding these services? Anyone can start. I give carte blanche. Who wants to go first?
I can go
Jordan,
first.
yep, the busy.
Well, I think that organizations that already support 2S LGBTQ+ youth or are looking to should continue for looking ways to expand This may include offering safe spaces both in person and virtually, and by providing a regularly updated resource list that could include healthcare and sexual education specific to the 2S LGBTQ plus community. Additionally, it would be nice if local organizations such as this that are already established would join forces with each other and grassroots organizations to share their knowledge, resources, and social connections. In my own experience, I've reached out to an organization that was not located in my hometown, but was close by. Unfortunately, because I was not a youth located in their geographic area, I was told that I was not able to access their services, even though that there were no comparable programs where I lived. So another way that L2S LGBTQ plus youth could be supported is through local youth shelters. And it would be helpful if they had policies in place that would specifically address the additional needs of homeless 2S LGBTQ plus youth and provide supports for safety that are often required. In order to truly understand what 2S LGBTQ plus youth need and to get this population leading and guiding services, I believe that there needs to be a push from a point of commonality, such as what we're seeing with the Do Better report. And I think that this is a great start. And I realize that funding sources often play a role as to who gets what support and where. However, it would be nice if social services were easier to navigate in general.
We hear you. We hear you, Jordan. Thank you for that. Does anybody want to add to that? Have more to say around that? I want to hear y'all. Daniela?
Yeah, sure. I can definitely add to it. Thanks so much, Jordan. I mean, okay, so I think I am approaching this differently. I think I am kind of the mind that like there is only so much that 2S LGBTQ folks can do, right? I think like if anyone who has seen this report, everyone can see like how beautifully laid out this is, how every recommendation, every point is so specific and extremely clear. And you know, like we have done the work and we continue to do the work, and now it feels like it's time for everyone else to step up. I feel like really tired of people making us feel like it's transformative or radical to have 2S LGBTQ folks in positions of power or leading organizations. I mean, I think it feels transformative, and that feels sad to me, right? I think it shouldn't feel transformative or radical. It should just be something that happens because it just makes sense. It's smart. The stats show that when our most marginalized folks are supported and represented, everyone does better, everyone thrives. So I think like when we're thinking of how do we get to this place where we see more 2S LGBTQ folks like leading and guiding services, it's education, right? And I think like that feels like it falls on us again. And I think like this recommendation number 7 of the Do Better project that really speaks to the need for ongoing training and capacity building focused on supporting 2S LGBTQ youth and challenging homophobia, biphobia, transphobia, and racism. I think it's that, right? I think it's having racialized and indigenous 2S LGBTQ folks leading these trainings. It's recognizing our worth. It's paying for our time, our energy, our trauma. And like, it's now time for like white, cis, straight, able-bodied, neurotypical folks to step up, to do the work, to educate yourself, and like to see how impactful society can be when we are all represented. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you, Daniela. Speak on it. I really, thank you. Wait out.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jordan, Danella, and thank you, Rosie, for moderating our panel and for the lovely introductions. Before I answer, I just want to situate myself because I'm not in Ontario. I'm joining us from the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Coast Salish peoples, known to some as Vancouver, and that include the territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, Stolo, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. Jordan and Danella talked about kind of the need for resource and funding for these organizations. And I want to just add on that by saying once you have these resources to launch a youth program, it might be important to foster an environment where 2S LGBTQ plus youth will feel comfortable taking the lead. And since you're all here, I think like I don't need to emphasize to you like the importance of having these programs. But I think I can say this as someone like on the slow march towards not being a youth anymore, is that we don't know what youth needs, right? Like I might have some reference points to what youth today needs, but I certainly don't know what tomorrow's youth would need in their social services. And I think there's a strong tendency for us to develop a program from the ground up and claim ownership as like the organizations, but I think it's also important to recognize that grassroots organizers have been developing programs from the very beginning when there are not a lot of resources. So I think it's important for social service organizations to reach out to 2SLGBTQ youth to let them know, or at least let them know that they can reach out to you guys to when you have resources for them to develop.
Yes, yes. Thank you for all these answers, because I think they bring together a lot of maybe different ways to approach the issue about not having youth around. And it's true that as you get older, you kind of forget what youth need. And it's because human beings become selfish. As we get older, we like look to our interest group. But I remember when I was young, I really hated the fact that adults would forget that they were also young one time and that they had needs at this point and they would change. So I think flexibility is also a big part of it. Because giving resources is one thing, but also when it comes to the resources, as we see, like our times change quickly, right? So like with COVID and everything like that, everything has changed really quickly. So the deliverables that you had 3 months ago may not be the deliverables that can be met right now. So how do we change that to make sure that people are getting supported and not being on Zoom all day? The second question I have is around social services. So social services, as you know, sorry, I stutter, sorry, ASL, sorry. So social services is a broad category of a wide range of community-based organization, everything from family services, LGBTQ services, so youth recreation, and much more than that. So what is an example of an organization or group that you have seen actually do better and support LGBTQ youth? Wow, it's quiet over here. It's quiet. Then if the answer is none, it could be none. That's okay, but that is quiet. Wait, Tal, do you want to go first? After we can go to Jordan.
For sure. If I can just give a shout out to LGBT YouthLine. I promise I wrote this script on my own. It's not a thing that they sent me. Just from my experience with the Youth Ambassador Project, I feel like everything from the very beginning to the end are all centered around us, and that we were really involved in the decision-making process, from designing the survey at the very beginning to analyzing the responses, and then to coming up with the recommendations that we've just shared, that Shivani and Anu just shared with you. So I feel like that was really refreshing for me, because I thought that we would just be like consulted or asked our opinion and not really be tasked with leading the projects with our own ideas. And that is not to say that like we did all the work, like YouthLine, everyone in YouthLine did so much to help us with the logistics and support, from Haley, Berka, and Anu for like just helping us analyzing, making sense of the data. And I think that was a wonderful example of having the youth lead the project, but at the same time providing the necessary support. So thank you so much.
If I can speak now, just like White Tao, I clearly think that the LGBT YouthLine is doing a great job of supporting youth and working towards breaking down the many barriers that still exist for them. And I can also say that I believe that the education system has good intentions and needs to continue to evolve its attempts to support 2SLGBTQ+ people through curriculum support, hiring practices, and the formation of GSAs and support groups. I think that I've certainly witnessed that, at least in the Thames Valley District School Board. However, I believe that learning and change is constant and that there's always more work to be done. And I think that no matter which social organization that we're talking about, there still needs to be stronger, more clear-cut and obvious efforts made to address homophobia, biphobia, and transphobia directly. Acceptance and or support of the 2SLGBTQ plus community cannot merely be assumed. And I believe that support for this population needs to be spoken in a preemptive fashion rather than as a reaction to something that has happened. And I think that this is especially true in the world of organized and recreational sport or extracurricular activities. I definitely applaud the braveness of anyone in those spaces who are willing to fully live as themselves. I know that I've kind of experienced that kind of community where I've definitely had to face different adversities, but I do also applaud the organizations that are willing to support the 2SLGBTQ plus participants in doing so.
Yes, thank you, Jordan. Thank you for that. Especially when we talk about recreation and sports, we are going, like, there's really hard times right now with recreation, sport, and trans youth. And a lot of people think, oh, well, this is the other side of the border. It can't happen here. Things creep up on us really, really fast. And we should be able, like you said, preemptively and not see it as like a reaction, because by the time that a law passes or a policy happens, it's quite often really too late and a lot of harm has already been done. So how do we actually see that from before? So thank you for that, Jordan. Daniela, you got something?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think, like, in addition to what was said, like, of course, LGBT YouthLine as well. And I think, like, for me, like, I think the first organization that popped into my head was Planned Parenthood Toronto. I think I'm speaking, like, very personally, because I think a lot of the work that I do and my passion for working with racialized 2S LGBTQ youth definitely was birthed in, like, the trainings that I received there and the programmings that I attended. PT has, like, a wide range of programming for 2S LGBTQ youth, and over the past 2 years, I've seen a really big increase and concerted effort towards more programming for racialized 2S LGBTQ youth, specifically for Black and Brown youth, which I think is really fantastic to see. They have a lot of resources for youth sex workers, virtual workshops on health and wellness for Black youth, employment workshops like BIPOC, trans, and non-binary groups. Yeah, and I think what I find that they do a really good job of, and also YouthLine does, is kind of doing this needs assessment, or so doing this kind of like question out to our community to be like, hey, like what are we missing? What do we need here? And then kind of taking that back and really implementing that. And yeah, I think as a Black queer woman, when I first moved to Toronto as like a baby gay in 2016, I was really searching for some community, and I had like just moved from Kingston because I'd spent 4 years at Queen's, which is very white and very straight. And my like first volunteer position at PPT as a youth advisor for the LGBTQ youth initiative was like honestly like one of the first times in my whole life that I felt like I could like be my full self and show up like as like both Black and queer and like be held in that space. Yeah, and I think that's how I felt for a lot of the programming at Planned Parenthood Toronto, but I also am seeing that like fully aware of like the racist past that Planned Parenthood has had. And I say that and acknowledge that I can see the steps that they're taking to improve the lives of 2S LGBTQ youth in Toronto. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for all your answers, actually. I am old and bitter, so I am like, I see a problem with everything. So so thank you for bringing light to these organizations that you actually think did very well. I am not that person. So, and I think what I would like to actually ask also, what example have you seen of organization actually failing LGBTQ youth? That's the question I could answer. But it's y'all, all of them. So Jordan, go ahead.
Well, I think that in schools, 2S LGBTQ plus students have difficulty reporting homophobia, transphobia, and biphobia in a safe manner. A lot of times the actions that perpetuate hate or threats against 2S LGBTQ plus students are very direct and perpetuated by specific people. And when threats or hate incidents are reported to administrative staff within the current system, the perpetrator may face consequences, but oh, sorry.
It's okay. Take your time.
But the victim is very susceptible to retaliation from the aggressor. And keeping in mind that the initial incident is often fueled by hate, it is easy to see why victims are often hesitant to report. I know that I personally have been victim to outward and violent homophobia within my own school. Even though the administrative staff was extremely supportive and were ready to take action against the instigators, I personally did not feel safe with what may have resulted afterwards. And as much as I know that we need to stand up to these forms of aggression, I was worried about what the ultimate consequences might have been for myself. So in short, there needs to be a system in place that aids and protects LGBTQ plus students from outward and direct homophobia, transphobia, and biphobia, but that also ensures their safety beyond the retributions given to the perpetrators.
Yes, definitely. Because I think it's something called like double victimization. You go to the victimization of what happened to you, and then you get victimized also by like the process of trying to seek justice. So no, I hear you. Thank you for that, Jordan. Anyone else?
Yeah, I can go next. Yeah, I think, and kind of going off of what Jordan is speaking of, I think like a way in which a lot of organizations fail us is by labeling themselves as like queer friendly, right? I think I remember this like so clearly when I was at university, that like a lot of organizations or like a lot of like student groups would put like this like little sticker to be like, this is a queer friendly space because they did like one training and like we're good to go. And yeah, I think it can do it can just be like really harmful. And I think a lot of the times, you know, it's said by folks that are not 2SLGBTQ youth, and said by like straight white cis people who did one training and received a certificate. And I think like, you know, like doing one training doesn't make your space queer friendly. And I think also like even like one person's experience from the 2S LGBTQ community saying that this space was good and affirming, you know, is also not the case for every 2S LGBTQ person and youth, because, you know, we know that like of like the intersections that are in our lives, such as race, gender, ability, income, that really impact our experiences and the way that people treat us. So I do think it's a really big disservice when organizations label themselves as that. And I think when we think of like the ways in which they can actually create safer spaces for 2S LGBTQ youth, I think it's through ongoing education. It's not just one training, it's like monthly trainings, quarterly trainings, having racially diverse 2S LGBTQ folks like in leadership positions. It's consulting with 2S LGBTQ organizations on practices and policies, even just like to ensure that the spaces that they're creating are safe.
Absolutely.
Yeah, or safe, as safe as possible. Yeah.
Yes, thank you for that. And I love that the fact that you said the queer friendly thing, because people think that justice and liberation is about us being friends. I don't need to be your friend because if like I don't need to be a friend for this to be happening. I don't need a friendly space. I need a safe one, and I need a space where I can be myself. Because sometimes I might come in this space and not be friendly. Actually, I might be having a bad day. I might need support.
Yeah.
I might be in crisis. So I ain't gonna be nobody's friend right now.
Mm-hmm.
What I need is support. So I hear that. Wait, how you want to weigh in?
Yeah, and I just want to build on what Danella said about organizations labeling themselves as queer friendly, and in some instances, like kind of labeling themselves as like the arbitrator of 2S LGBTQ issues. I just want to share an anecdote. When I worked at a event, which was at our local library. It was built a long time ago, so it had single occupant accessible washrooms, but they're gendered for really no good reason at all. So in the setup of the event, I like used like a paper to say it's all gender washroom and to cover it up. And while I was doing that, I think it was maybe like a member of the board of an organization that's funding our event, like came up to me and she, a cis woman, came up to me and said like, oh, like, is this enough like for a day? Like a snarky comment. And it was like like, ma'am, we might be in the library, but like, you don't have to read. That's what I wish I said, but because, you know, just at the moment, I was just kind of left stunned because like I didn't build the library, like I'm trying to resolve the issue and I wish I could fix it for the for the rest of time, but like that's where I'm like, that's the situation I was put in. So perhaps I don't fault the youth participants for the society failure, structural failure that has nothing to do with them, who is just trying to help. Yeah.
Thank you for that. And yeah, it's what happens with boards and things like that happens all the time, where the accountability gets turned into the funders. The accountability is no longer with the community because of funding, right? And that's why like sometimes it can get tricky in that realm. But I'm sure that you all have experience with that, and you know. I had one more question, but I can't ask it because we are on time. But I want to thank you all for your brilliant, brilliant answers. And thank you for like just putting us on and keeping on our toes. Because I really do believe that youth lead the way. And I'm really happy to have been here with y'all. So thank you so much. And
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Thank you for having us.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Yes.
Rosie.
Thank you.
Y'all are really fun. Thank you so much, and informative. Thank you. Do I turn off my camera? Oh, what do I do?
Thanks so much, Rosie and panelists. I really want to hear the answer for the last question, but I appreciate
can we?
taking
Can
the
we?
time.
Oh,
You know what? If folks can be succinct and you want to do the last question, I think
yeah, I
know it's a good
really
closing
do. I
question.
think that's a really good question, and it ties in really well. So because we're talking about like funding and like how the accountability turns towards the funders and not the community. So the last question I have for y'all, hey, I'm back. So the last question I have for y'all is, can you share how you've been involved with advocacy for change in your own community? Succinct, quick. Go ahead.
I guess I'll go first.
Yes.
You know, I'm currently a high school student, so a lot of the things that I do to work toward advocacy within my different communities are through like different organizations. So for example, I'm currently on the first Robotics Canada National Youth Council, where I've spearheaded and I'm currently producing and publishing a youth magazine called Being First, which has a focus on equity, diversity, and inclusion in the first robotics community and beyond. So that's just one of them. But most of my other different kind of activities or organizations that I like to be involved with have a strong focus around equity within their communities. So yeah.
The busy bee. Next.
I can go next. Yeah. Jordan, you're amazing. I wish I was on a robotics team when I was in high school.
Yeah.
So I am currently the mental health support worker at Black Cap. So it stands for the Black Coalition for AIDS Prevention. And I feel really lucky that the work that I do kind of directly impacts my community. And as the support worker there, I provide like counseling support for Black folks in need, like mainly Black folks living with HIV. But an also really great part of my position is that I get to work with my awesome colleagues in creating new programming and supports for the Black community, by the Black community. And this programming is always based on the wants and needs of our community. And so something that we are actually having like a program next week that's like an all ages ACB, HIV positive LGBTQ women and non-binary folks initiative. And I know that's a mouthful, but basically it's going to be a space where Black HIV positive LGBTQ women and non-binary folks are able to come together and share experiences and have a space of their own. And this program is really kind of like a direct result of the realization that a lot of spaces, programming and funding for folks living with HIV is mainly specific for MSM, so men who have sex with men, and doesn't really leave room for women. And so, yeah, and also this focus on MSM populations provides like an inaccurate representation of the numbers for ACB women living with HIV and also LGBTQ ACB women living with HIV. So yeah, it's our hope that this program is able to kind of begin to address this lack of support. That's all.
Thank you so much. Now?
I'll be quick. So as Rosie accurately pointed out, I'm a hopeless law student at UVC, and I am. But that would be accurate. I am the co-president for Outlaw for the upcoming year. So Outlaw is our advocacy student group for 2S LGBTQ students on campus. Very cleverly named, if you ask me. And so we advocate for folks, especially Indigenous, Two-Spirit, and non-binary folks who are underrepresented in the legal community sometimes against the administration, sometimes against professors who fails to realize that theoretical scholarly debate could have a real impact on the students in the classroom.
Thank you so much. Okay, so we're actually done, but thank you so much for your input. Thank you for plugging in the work that you do in community, and I'm sure that people will have ways to contact you afterwards if they need help and support. So I'm really excited about that. So Berko, you can definitely take it over now. We're done for real. Thank you again, y'all.
Thank you, everyone. In true technology ways, I think Haley is having internet issues, so I'm pseudo taking over. We are answering some of the questions through the text window directly, given the time that we have left. If I can also have Shivani and Anu join me, and Haley if she's back. A few of these questions are also targeted for the panelists. I feel like they're better suited to answer these. So I'll put them out, and then if anyone else wants to answer them. So one of the questions was, how can we pass the baton to folks outside the 2S LGBTQ youth community to continue this work? I think, Daniela, this is coming from what you said. Are there ways to circumvent creating echo chambers where youth are sharing their experiences, recommendations, but not being heard by those who need to hear these voices the most? So I want to make space for anyone who's on our panel, or also Anu, Haley, and Shivani, if you want to respond.
I can respond. Yeah, so sorry, I'm just reading the question. Yeah, I mean, I think it is through education, right? And so I think it's through education. I think constant connection with the 2S LGBTQ community, because I think at the end of the day, like, I think it's wonderful that folks outside of the 2S LGBTQ community want to do this work and continue this work, but I also think that this work at the end of the day can't really happen without us. Yeah. Sorry, I'm reading the second half, so if anyone else wants to jump in.
I'll chime in real quick with a few reflections. Yeah, I was really moved, Daniela, by your comments about like how much work 2S LGBTQ youth have done already, and my experience as a non-youth, crying face, but I was a youth a time ago. Going to Rosie's point about people who forget that they were youth. A few things that I've learned for sure is that we actually need to have 2S LGBTQ youth and folks across generations like making those decisions. It isn't passing off a baton in a way that is sort of like, okay, folks who aren't part of our communities are now going to take over and make all the decisions. It really is about like, one, positioning folks with lived experience to be in those positions of power and decision making. I think secondly, this is the part that I think is uncomfortable for folks, is creating a space for real deep unlearning, so that folks who are not part of our communities recognize that it's their responsibility. If they're committed to liberation and justice, it's actually their responsibility to take on this work just as much as it's their responsibility to complete a funder report, to get an update for their organization's annual report, to hire someone, to do a performance evaluation. All of those things that people, especially in social services, have understood as their core responsibility, built into that has to be a core responsibility of how are you showing up for 2S LGBTQ youth, in particular racialized and Indigenous 2S LGBTQ youth, every single day.
Thanks, Anu. Thanks, Daniela. Does anyone else want to add anything? And then I'll ask one more question because it feels like a good closing based on the conversations we've had today. What are the ways that you protect your energy, spirit, mental, emotional well-being while navigating community work and or doing advocacy work? Also a question of how do you set boundaries in this work that feels never ending? And coming from our past question too, of like, it just feels like we keep being asked and asked and asked, and how do you set the boundaries? Jordan, you got spotlit. Daniela, you got spotlit. Anyone who wants to go, I know everyone has their own ways of dealing with this. And also maybe you haven't figured it out. Like I can start. I know that like for me, I always struggle with this balance of like, can I just do more? Can I just push more? Especially in the role that I take on as someone who has aged out of being youth, but has the privilege of being around youth every day. It's a never ending struggle of even these like webinars, even like as we get attacked every day, it's like there's a real emotional mental toll. And I always say that to folks who are trying to be allies, to be like, you know, you keep asking us what we need and we keep telling you this report was just another way to do that. And also like do work, take some action, like can't keep asking us what we need, like actually go out there and do it, because every day there's an impact on us.
Yeah, and I think that when we are doing different kind of advocacy work for any group of people, but today we're talking about specifically the 2SLGBTQ plus community, I think that it truly does come from a source of altruism. And for me personally, I know that doing this kind of work and taking the steps to actively serve communities is really fulfilling for myself. So I don't think there's really any specific way to like prevent burnout. And there's definitely ways you can set boundaries. You're like, okay, I'm going to dedicate X amount of time to serving and actively doing this action. So at least that's how I'm managing my own time, I guess, trying to serve different communities. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think like similarly, I think like in the like it's hard. Like I think I haven't figured it out either. Simply put, I have not figured it out either. And I think I really try to be like, when I'm at work, and then when I'm not at work, I like don't have my work phone with me. I like don't like I'm just like not plugged in at all, because then I think there's so many times that I'm like, oh, I'm just gonna check it just because I'm like worried about this client, and then I just get like wrapped into like something else. Yeah, and I think Jordan, like you touched on burnout, which I think is like I did like a really cool training with this woman named Vicki Reynolds, and she speaks about this idea of burnout in the sense of like the work that we do as like community organizers, in the fact that what we're feeling is not necessarily burnout, but we're feeling like an exhaustion and like a frustration with the lack of support that we can give to our community and to our clients, to the people that are accessing our services, due to the structures that are in place, right? Like due to the government, due to like the powers that be, right? That kind of that don't allow us to kind of give what we know that we can give. Yeah. So I think just keeping that in mind, yeah.
Thanks both. So what I'm hearing is none of us have the answers. We just figure it out day by day.
Yes.
Haley, do you want to come and close us off? You are back.
Yes, I do. I am back. Sorry, folks, was having some technical difficulties. Came just in time to close us off with 1 minute left. So thank you everyone for being here. We do have some next steps that we're hoping that folks can help us out with. So step number 1, we have a survey. It's going to be in the chat. This survey is really important for us, because it's going to help us determine what our next steps are as an organization. What happens with the report from here? What happens with the recommendations? What happens with their needs assessment? How do we continue doing this advocacy work? How do we continue demanding that folks in positions of power do better when supporting 2S LGBTQ youth? So please fill out that survey. It's very short. Really looking for folks' feedback around what we can be doing next, and also how we can support you in implementing these recommendations. Second step, share the report. Please share the report. Share it to all the people that you know, to your friends and family and coworkers and bosses, and also local politicians. Take that lead, especially for folks who are allies in this conversation. Like, take some of this work off of us, please. The youth have named what they need, and now it's our time to share that around and actually hold folks, people in positions of power, politicians, accountable to doing better. Third step, if you are a social service provider, work in the social service field, whatever, actually, if you're anyone, you can order our outreach materials online. So again, Christy is going to put that in the chat. So if you're looking for things like our little service cards that share information with youth about our peer support line, or you're looking for posters, if you're like in a school or, you know, an office or whatever, like we have so many resources that we can send your way. We will send those for free. We also have our needs assessment reports from last year that we mentioned a couple times. That's included in that. We will send it to you. And number 4, add your organization or your supports or your group or whatever to our resource database. We have a front-facing resource database. We're trying to compile all of the services and supports throughout Ontario onto our database. So that way youth and also service providers can go on there and see what, you know, if there's specific services for trans and gender diverse folks in your region. You can look at that on our database. So if you are not on our database, please, please, please go add yourself. So there's a whole ton of other next steps that we could name, but we are out of time. It's 2:01. So just wanted to thank all of you so much for being here. I know that times right now are really challenging, really, really challenging, and we really appreciate all of you being here and having these conversations about doing better. Youth deserve better. So thank you for being here. Please, please, please fill out that survey, follow those next steps, be in touch with me. If you're looking for, you know, if you want to have conversations about this report or ways that you can support YouthLine, please be in touch. And with that, at 2:02, only 2 minutes behind, thank you to all of the amazing panelists, to Rosie as our moderator, to all of the YouthLine folks, and Anu as our research lead for being here and sharing this information. And yeah, we look forward to connecting with folks in the future.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.